EVS38 is actually my first. Who else here is at the EVS for the first time ever? Oh, great. So I feel that it's you and I who get to discover this magical event for the first time. And I was given the subject and the title of Can Scandinavia and Europe drive the future of circular vehicles? Of course, the answer to that is yes, which gives us 59 minutes of additional coffee break. But since a lot of us are seated here, I think a lot of us want to sort of dig into the question about circularity a little bit deeper. And I think we're doing the right thing because, believe it or not, when we exit the wonderful world of EVS, there's still going to be people out there who are going to doubt and question the switch to electromobility. And we know the arguments that they used to use. Oh, the range is not enough for my needs. Now nobody can claim that anymore. Or they said, well, charging simply takes too long, and that claim is no longer valid at all, as we know. But some of them, you know, they would go to any length to not have to leave the petrol fossil fuel era behind. So they come up with the weirdest of arguments, and some of them relate to what we're going to discuss just now. They say, well, I heard that actually the impact of the electric vehicle, the climate impact, can be even worse than the impact of the ICE, the internal combustion engine. And we've seen all the statistics to prove them wrong, but we still know that it makes sense to listen to them and tell them, you know what, this is the key reasons why you should also embrace electromobility. We also hear them saying, well, what about the raw materials? First of all, what's the input, the impact of all those raw materials being used? And secondly, where do they come from, and should we really depend on those states? And I'm sort of glad that they finally bring it up, because for decades or centuries, we should have brought it up when it came to the petrol era. Where do we get the fossil fuels from? Here in Sweden, for those of us Swedish, 42%, the biggest country when it comes to importing fossil fuels, the petrol and diesel, to Sweden, is the country unknown. 42%, we don't know where it came from. Would that be a country that we are typically liking very much, or would it typically be a country that's sort of shy in telling actually it's Russian or Iranian? So probably there's a good reason, again, for us to move away from the fossil fuels into the electromobility era. But we're going to discuss that much further now, because, of course, the answer to those questions, so that we can follow up our dear friends who also want to be part of the electromobility world, lies within circularity. And we are gonna, I don't know if we can give it a second chance with the Mentimeter, because while we get our panelists up here, we're also gonna have your input. And I wanna have that input throughout. Yes, here we have. I wanna have the input throughout using the Mentimeter. I think most of us by now realize that it's by adding the subject at hand, the circular movement, to your own agenda. And in your own agenda, you click that you have comments, and that way you put comments that I will get to read in the app. So that's the way for you to interact and to make sure that you get the answers you need for your questions. And the first question that we pose to you, what is the most important factor in making vehicles truly circular? We're going to bring this to the panel. It seems that the clear winner here is the batteries. There's other parts of the vehicle, obviously, but it's the batteries that we're going to center the discussion around, because that's what we together agreed is the key component here. But there's also a fairly large minority saying, well, we should focus more on the actual use of recycled materials, focus more on make sure that there's a downstream market for the material. We're going to discuss that more. And also business models. For instance, leasing or sharing, could that hold the key to make Scandinavia and Europe a truly global center of knowledge and action for circularity? With those introductory words, I believe that all our panelists are ready. They've got their microphones on and are ready to help us answer these and other questions. Let's welcome them one by one. First of them, you saw their car immediately when you entered the EVS. It's Sofia Andersson, who's the circular lead at Polestar. Sofia, welcome. You can do better than that, come on. Sofia, so great to have you here. Please have a seat.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, you get to choose.
This one.
And then we have Andres Kublik, who's the Chief Executive Officer at QSense. And I think some of us might not know QSense, but QSense is an absolute world leader when it comes to quality control for the automotive industry. Exactly what we're going to discuss now. Andres, please. We have got Ole Christian Enger, who's the CEO of Hydrovolt, a Norwegian friend, and actually a global pioneer in circular batteries. What we just said is the key element of this discussion. Please welcome Ole Christian. And last but not least, we have Hans-Erik Melin, who's the managing director at Circular Energy Storage. Again, some of us might not know immediately, but it's the leading analyst when it comes to lithium-ion battery end-of-life markets. And then we got myself, Mattias GOLDMANN, CEO of the 2030 Secretariat, by far the least important person here because we want your questions and your answers. And I'm going to start with the four of you with a fairly open question, which I want to build on what I said in my introductory remarks on how circularity can help strengthen the competitiveness of what we're doing here, the competitiveness of the European EV market. Sofia.
Yes, I mean, circularity is all about being mindful of resources. It's also one of the key tools that we have to tackle the many issues that we see today. We have climate change, resource scarcity, biodiversity loss, pollution, and implementing the circular economy really will help us mitigate and safeguard the natural resources that all of we are reliant on for everything that we do. So, yeah, it's really key.
Thank you. Anders?
From my point of view, it is a place where we can really develop know-how. We can really develop our new skills and build up the competitive advantage over the other continents, let's say. Right now, we are rather followers, and we have to find a solution to take our position. And circularity definitively being quite fresh leaves some room for us to catch up the rest, yeah?
That's nice. We're going to build on that, strengthening our competitiveness throughout the discussion. Thank you. Ole Christian, please.
Yeah, so I represent Hydrovolt. We recycle batteries, EV batteries, and large industrial batteries. And the company was founded to solve three main challenges. The first being the waste problem that batteries that reach end of life represents. So we basically eliminate that. The second is to produce critical raw materials within Europe. And the third is to do so with much lower emissions. We have proven that we can do this, so I think that's the explanation I would give.
Excellent, thank you. And Hans-Erik?
Yeah, I mean, to correctly answer the question, I think the answer is no, in a sense. I mean, if you really look at...
Can Scandinavia and Europe drive the future of circularity? No.
Yes, but then I need just 1 minute.
Go for it.
I mean, I think already that the car industry, and not least the European one, is very circular. I don't know what we have in our homes that more than we keep for a very long time, that we repair. We trade ownership and go through different kind of use cases. So that's great. And that we can recycle the battery and other components in electric vehicles, that is obviously a complete game changer, right? I mean, it means that at the point, which is quite far from here though, but at the point when we have a lot of electric vehicles, we can use those batteries and those cars to, again, make new ones. And that is exactly what we are not doing today when the fuel is just going out in the air and create problems. But my point is that I'm not sure whether circularity can really drive a position. I think it can do that in the heavy industry, in buses, in lorries. But when it comes to electric cars, there is more. Electric car is more similar to a mobile phone than to a lorry. Mm-hmm. From a circular perspective, it's very distributed, which makes it difficult to create those kind of, closed models where circularity is the focus of it. But you can obviously make great cars that are circular. which
This
I
is
think
super
we already
interesting.
have here on the stage.
We sort of have 3 against 1 here. And before we all attack you, let's start by circling in or narrowing in on the theme here. And we also heard the masters of ceremony saying that, well, what is really circular? What's the difference between simply recycling and what are the key advantages, as you see it, between a circular business model and the traditional, more linear business model? I know that you've thought a lot about that at Polestar.
Yeah, I mean, all manufacturing comes with environmental and social risk, and so does the manufacturing of EVs. And as I mentioned in the beginning, circularity really is one of the key tools that we have to tackle many of these issues. And if we look at a specific material as an example, if we look at aluminium, there are so many synergies in using recycle instead of virgin. First of all, it has a 95% reduction in carbon emissions compared to standard Chinese. It will also reduce environmental impact since we do not need the mining, and it will also mitigate many of the social risks that we see with that. So I mean, many advantages, and I also want to emphasize that when we also discuss price between virgin or recycle, we also need to put all of the numbers on the table. I think it's really crucial that, I mean, the upfront cost of using recycle instead of virgin might be a bit higher, but if we source virgin risk material, we also need to put a lot of effort into due diligence, traceability and audit schemes. So I really want to emphasize that when we look at the cost, that we also need to take that full scope into account, because I think that now we have the opportunity really to either only risk mitigate or actually build future-proof our business when we look at different materials.
Ole Christian, I want to ask you, first of all, to explain to us, using the battery as your example, what is the difference between circular and what we've been doing until now? And then what are the key benefits here?
Well, I think until now it has mainly been primary materials that enter batteries. But as they are utilized in an application on the road and they reach end of life, then we basically don't have a choice anymore. We can't landfill it, and it would be a bit stupid to export it. So we have the opportunity, we have the resources in Europe, so why not recycle it and produce new raw materials that can be reintroduced into new batteries. So I don't think we really have a choice. I think it will be quite some time until we have much recycled content in batteries, but that will come as more batteries are produced. We obviously need a lot of primary materials for quite some time, but we need to build solutions so that we are utilizing the resources as best as we can.
To me, that makes a lot of sense. We're going to come back to why it's not as obvious as it first seems. But when I compare the reasons you gave, Sophia, you mentioned environmental and climatic reasons. Andreas, you said that it's more about competitiveness.
Well, I would even say it's all about creativity, because when you are following the linear model, the places are already taken. The word is somehow in the order. When the shake-up starts, there is a place for fresh idea, new people, new companies like my company. 6 years ago, we sold the first battery. Right now, we do millions of them because it happened and we had enough resources to follow the requirements of the customers and right now to rule the market a little bit. It is possible, and I don't think it would be possible with ICE engine.
Why not?
Well, I think the level of hierarchy in the supply chain is so well settled that the newcomers are, it's really hard to be a newcomer. You have to have absolutely something beyond imagination just to break the rule.
And I guess, Hans-Erik, that your key sort of argument against the rest of the panel here is that, yes, that's all true, but it's true for the whole world.
Yes, that's a very good framing of it. Absolutely. I mean, I kind of object against the image that we are going from a linear model to a circular model. I mean, one interpretation of that could be that we are all very wasteful and that we only recycle because we have to, or some, I mean, need a stick for really do that. Another interpretation would be that now we can use recycled material instead of virgin materials, right? But I think we really need to put that into perspective. Today we have about 5% of the vehicles in the world are electric today, of the light electric vehicles, and less of heavy vehicles. That means that if we took all those 5% vehicles and put that in Ole Christian's shredder and recycle them, we would get exactly 5% cars that we can now place on the market, which would mean that we will remain on 5% because we now took them, right? Actually, we will get less because batteries are much bigger today than what they were 10 years ago. So we still need to mine these 95%. So when we are saying that recycling we will be independent in Europe because we will keep all our materials here, I mean that is definitely not sustainable. That is not real. And then we should also electrify heavy transportation. We should electrify shipping, trains, aviation, energy storage. So we need to mine a lot of materials for a very long time, and around 2060, 2070, unless we change technology before that. Then obviously we can, I mean, I have this discussion in the US quite a lot where they are even more obsessed about this idea that if we recycle the material, it becomes American. First we have to take it from DRC and from Chile, and then we have American material. But I mean, in my view, is that if you want to do something about resource efficiency, don't make 150 kilowatt-hour batteries. That's my first tip. Because that's obviously the problem. I mean, and I think fast charging is a very important aspect, for instance. So I mean, that could change it. But my message is that recycling is super important, and it would be obviously extremely stupid to not do it. And it has always been happening as long as we have had batteries to recycle.
I want to bring up, and first of all, I want to say that thank you, Christine, Nagisa, and everybody else who's putting questions here. They are going to be sort of introduced throughout the session, so keep those questions coming. They are right here at my app. But I want to add another argument that I find compelling for becoming more circular, and it's that I think we're all scrolling on our phones on an hourly basis to see what is Trump doing now? What is happening with the trade wars, and in fact now also even the wars, both Russia against Ukraine, but also now in the Middle East, which means to me that security of supply becomes so much more important. And security of supply is, of course, easier to fix if you got the raw materials that you need in your own country or with your own customers, rather than in a mine somewhere very far away in a country that might be difficult to deal with. For instance, Sophia, is that a key factor for you when you consider how to go more circular?
Well, I mean, first of all, I mean, the EV industry is global, and so are we. So I think that the current political landscape with more protectionism doesn't really bring any value. It's just something that we need to navigate in. And when we discuss, for example, the battery value chain, I think it's really crucial to mention that, I mean, securing raw materials is one thing, but we still lack so many vital parts of the battery value chain in Europe. So if we don't want to ship those same raw materials outside of Europe, we still need to build capacity over the full value chain. So I think that we need to also realize that the value chains are still global, and we are far from reaching some kind of resilience on that in Europe. Yeah.
The CEO of a circular battery factory, how does that play with you?
No, I think it's important that everyone is aware that we do not have a full value chain for battery production, battery recycling in Europe today. And unfortunately, we have seen a lot of the projects that's been running have been suspended lately. So that's very unfortunate, and for good reasons. This value chain is dominated by Asia. They have 15 years head start, and they're brilliant at what they're doing. So building up a complete value chain in Europe is really, really hard. And I guess you, Hans-Erik, you have plenty of things to talk about when it comes to this topic.
Yeah, no.
I know you have.
May I talk about this?
You may. And in fact, I was asking our dear panelists here to bring a prop. There's not going to be any PowerPoints, don't worry. But I told them that they could bring stuff. And I know you did. You brought a whole car. We saw it immediately in the entrance.
Yes.
And you brought something with you as well. Show us.
Yes, so I was super happy to really be invited to this.
Well,
Yeah.
It's on the screen now. Perfect.
Okay, perfect. So yeah,
For those of you who are younger than from 1990, you need to explain what it is.
Yes, yeah. That's what we always share on Facebook, right? Look how old and experienced we are, right? So this is a compact cassette from Tudor. So yes, I was very excited to come here. I'm from Gothenburg originally, and I grew up 25 kilometers from here in a small village called Nol. We had the biggest battery plant in Sweden, Tudor, that was started in 1914, making submarine batteries and forklift batteries, starter batteries. And in the 50s, they also started what they call dry batteries, so which are the alkaline batteries and zinc carbon batteries now down in Ängelholm. And I will ask all Swedes that needs to go to Riksdagsarkivet and read. There is a bill from a social democratic politician in 1980 when she expressed her fear that we will lose battery production in Sweden, and this is key really to our capabilities and to our independence, because the Danish Hellesens had been acquiring this. That's one story.
And that was before we were even thinking about electric cars.
Absolutely, yes, and it was primary batteries in that case. Tudor, they did not really make compact. This was actually, so I was at my mom's and dad's place yesterday, or tonight, and this was my first compact cassette from the 70s. And it was Tudor that did not really make it. I think it's a BASF compact, but they did that as well. The story about the compact cassette is, it was Philips that invented it in 1963. BASF was behind it as well. And Sony got fast the license to produce it. And if you think about what the compact cassette is, it's a thin polyester stripe, right, with a metal oxide on top. We all remember how this is a low noise ferro oxide batteries, and then they come chrome oxide or dioxide, and a lot of other chemistries. There was more chemistries, and this was better and better, right? And all went to Japan, where they had all the electronics manufacturing, and to Korea. I remember my first cheap battery. It was a Gold Star, and Gold Star was Korean. They merged with Lucky Chemical and became LG. And if you think about what is a LED lamp, an OLED screen, a solar cell, and a lithium-ion battery, it's all coated films. They are really good at that. They have been good at that in Korea and Japan and China for 40, 50 years, much better than we. And I think that is the key here, that we believe that we can also make these batteries. But there's so much expertise, and there's so much the upstream value chain to this, which is the key problem for recycling, right? Because even if we would keep all the materials here, we have to export them to South Korea, because that is where they make precursors to cathodes that goes into the batteries. And that comes to my final conclusion in the sense that if we really want to do this, what we really need is a really strong demand for batteries, why not from electric vehicles?
Perfect. Let's build on that demand because, and that was also what a strong minority of us said in the question that was just prior to us coming up here. And Andres, I think a key component, obviously, to create demand is to feel confident that this is a great thing, quality-wise, for instance. What do you see?
Well, quality is, I do believe, everything, and the way we understand quality is not just sorting product for good and bad, but the quality is how to make the product better and better, how to improve product, how to make it cheaper, how to make it smoother, how to make it much more friendly to the environment. This is our understanding of quality, and I do believe if we are going to have some industry here, we have to compete with quality. We have to compete with high value added products made in Europe rather than cheap. Oh, if we can afford to buy, of course. But that's the difference. Yeah, we have to focus on quality. We have to focus on rich chemistries and these kind of solutions.
Sophia, I think a lot of us are impressed with the vehicle we saw down there and your ambition, or not ambition, clearly stated target to be 100% climate neutral and much more circular. So do we start seeing the demand that is obviously needed here for circular solutions?
I mean, I think it's maybe important also to broaden the scope of circularity because, of course, it's using more recycled material and it's also, of course, recycling at end of life. But for us, it's also the full scope, being mindful of resources from the mine to recyclings. And we did a study together with Circular Economy a couple of years ago, looking into the total amount of resources needed over the full value chain to produce a car. So we know, for example, that the direct material input needed to a Polestar 2 is around just above 2 tons, but the total amount of material required across the value chain is 57 tons. So I mean, that's really huge. So we know that we cannot only focus on the direct material input, but utilizing more circular economy principles can also help us mitigate those risks and reduce that total number of material. And that study also gave us a lot of insight on where we need to focus to reduce. We need to focus on the battery, of course, but also the motor, electronics. So, I mean, lots of learnings and a lot to do still.
And a good thing that we have a circular battery facility in Scandinavia, in Norway. And Ole Christian, the way I understand it, I think it should be printing money, because first of all, you get money for receiving the materials. Then you deal with them, and then you get money when you sell them again. So you get money sort of at both ends. I just wish that would happen to me. And yet you told me it's still a hassle making a profit. How come?
Right. So, a couple of keywords: print money. It's a very, very good question, and I'll try to elaborate my views. And I'd like to go back to our owner, Hydro. It's a Norwegian company, large, 120 years old, been refining natural resources or transforming natural resources into useful products for a century, now focused on aluminium, and they have now also partnership agreements with some car producers in the room today to decarbonize and provide recycled solutions. And so they have a clear strategy on growing in the recycling space. So when they invested in Hydrovolt, I think they also thought this was fairly easy and that maybe at some point we'll print money. But in reality, it's quite different. It's really hard to do the recycling process. This is hazardous waste that we need to manage and convert into these beautiful critical raw materials. And I haven't seen much profits in this market yet. On the contrary, I see bankruptcies and suspended projects, which is very unfortunate. obviously, going forward, we need to develop both our processes and technologies to make it more robust, to be able to handle a large variety of batteries, and to make money on this. We need to have business models and a system that works through the producer responsibility and through the whole value chain, so that we can get a decent return on the investment. And then I just go back to our owner, Hydro. I think we need industrial players with a long-term horizon to succeed here, because it's very challenging to do this, to build a new industry without the experience and the long-term thinking.
And I just...
Go for it. Yeah, I want to hear Polestar first, because I think if you just agree, then it's all solved.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm really curious also to understand what we as an OEM need to do as well to make that happen, because I mean, it's also in our best interest that you succeed with your business.
Yeah, and that's a very good start and something we need to do much more of going forward. I think until now, battery making has been about performance and cost, and we need to take the next step into designing for recycling also to bring that cost down. So there are 3 things I really want you and your peers to work on. The first is to do the discharging step much easier and safer. And the second is to make the dismantling much easier. And the third is to provide information so that we can do the processing of the actual cells and modules much easier.
Yeah. And do you think that we need standards for this, or would collaboration just solve it?
I would love standards, but I also think that that's difficult, because most cell producers and battery producers, they consider these as trade secrets.
Yeah.
But I would like to welcome you to our facility, and we can have a look at the inbound storage, where you will probably see between 50 and 70 different battery types, and we have to handle all of them. And that's a major challenge.
And Ole Christian, that's one of the questions that several of you actually posed here. The typical place where you go with your end-of-life vehicle, is that a great place for battery recycling?
Come again, please.
The typical place where the scrapyard for the car, are they ready to deal with electric cars?
Unfortunately not. Even in Norway, the most mature EV market in the world, we see now that it's first now that car collectors are starting to receive significant volumes of EVs for scrapping. So obviously they have been focusing on fossil cars, but now in the next 5 years, they need to transform from handling mostly or only fossil cars to mostly EVs. So the Norwegian EV market has gone from 3,000 EVs on the roads 15 years ago to 800,000 today. And it's increasing with 150 per year. So it's going like this. The cars are on the road, so they quickly need to adapt and transform. And that's a big, big challenge.
And I want to ask you, Hans-Erik, because it seems to me that the market should be there since years ago, because there's this end-of-life legislation, 85%, I believe, of vehicles need to be recycled, 95% coming, and then the new EV, the EU directives that we're going to talk about soon. But even though the legislation has been there for quite a while, it's not happening. Why?
I think the biggest problem is really that quite early, in fact, the cart was really placed before the horse. I mean, when I actually started circular energy storage in 2017, I could never imagine what would happen in terms of interest for recycling. That has a little bit to do actually what you started when you presented us, that was kind of one pillar of the dark side of the EV. So it was a story that everybody profited from, that recycling was not happening, which never been true. It's rather that we haven't not really had a lot of batteries to recycle, because lithium-ion batteries, they are built into other products. There are very few that are not. And they live the life of those products. It can be a car, it can be a mobile phone. And then we had this perception that recycling is not working, which was to the benefit of everything that wanted to stop this development, but also, of course, for recycling entrepreneurs, for researchers and everything. So we got a huge boom, and also from an investment side. So we got a lot of money. I mean, when I was in the recycling sector before starting this, we had investments of like, some EU projects of 5 million or something. Now we saw $5 billion being invested in this industry. It's in the US. And the feedstock is just not there. And I think the problem is that when you invest a lot of venture capital and private equity into a market, you put a lot of companies with capacity that do not own their material. They should acquire the material in one end, and then they should sell it in the other end. Mm-hmm. And there is a shortage of material, but there is a big need to show their investors that everything was correct. And I think you missed one point with Hydrovolt, because I think from the beginning you had an excellent model, because you had another owner, which was Northvolt. And Northvolt, with the recycling plant, is one reason why that might never happen in Skellefteå is that it was really designed to do as little as possible with the material, so it could go back to precursor and cathode production. But it required that you had a battery plant next door. So when you don't have a battery plant next door, that process is not as great as it otherwise would have been, because that would have mean that you were part of that downstream market. But today, we don't have, except for Umicore's plant in Kokkola, which is not huge, we don't have any precursor production in Europe. And what I meant with demand, that the lack of demand, is really that when the EU Commission now said that, okay, car makers, you can wait 3 years to sell as many electric cars as you wanted. And ASEA later also said, thank you, but we also would like to discuss the targets in 2030 and 2035. What did that mean for the investment environment in Europe? Who would be interested to have higher energy costs, higher labor costs, longer permit periods, and to put a PCAM plant if you don't know whether there will be a cathode plant or a cell manufacturing plant? That's a problem.
Thank you for bringing us on to the topic of EU legislation, because obviously a lot of the questions that you have posed here are precisely on the end-of-life directive that is coming up, the Sustainable Battery Regulation Act, and the strategic plan on batteries and other such incentives. And Andrei, when you focusing on the quality issue here and on where the market might be going, when you look at these new EU strategic directives and where the EU wants to be heading, does that create the necessary preconditions for circular economy?
Definitively not.
Definitely not.
No, it is just part of the circle. The circle is not closed. Mm-hmm. If we want to close, we have to make sure that everybody makes money. Every move is secured, and every technology we need is installed. We cannot do it by issuing a paper. You know, we have to make some incentives. We have to make some investment programs. Whatever is behind must be done. Just legislation is far too less.
Ole Christian, can you go to the bank with the new EU legislation and say, I'm going to be super profitable now?
No, definitely not. If yes, I would have been there already, I think. So no, but I think what we see is that I think it's a lot of good legislation coming now. I know you maybe have some different opinions, but at least on some areas. But all in all, I think it's a lot of positive things. But it's also important to see what happens on the ground. And we see very lengthy permit processes. We see that getting export-import approvals necessary to ship battery materials across borders takes months, and we see also very little enforcement of the legislation that is coming. So I think important to not just make good documents and nice things on paper. We need to also enforce it and make sure that it gets an impact on the ground.
And these EU legislation proposals, one thing that they do is that they set targets on how much recycled content should be in different products for different materials like aluminium and so forth. And to me, it seems like that might be, I believe that the Commission might have thought, okay, this is a great way to create a market, to make sure that there's demand. But on the other hand, a lot of those materials don't actually exist in recycled form in Europe. Good or bad for business?
No, I think a good example is some have lobbied for not allowing export of black mass, this mass of the critical elements in the batteries. And the reasoning is to build up a supply chain in Europe. But then I don't have any customers anymore, because I had one customer, Northvolt, that's bankrupt. There are a few others in Europe, but not sufficient capacity. So if I can't export, then I have to close down.
And historically, it's not been proven then that stopping export has been the best driver, I believe. Norfolk, what's your view on it? Polestar, what's your view on this?
Well, I mean, I think it's a bit difficult to speak about EU policy without mentioning also the omnibus, for example. It's there are so many great ambitions within the EU. There are great ambition within both circularity and climate. And I also read a post on social media a couple of weeks ago during EU Green Week that Commissioner Roosevelt said that the goal is clear for EU to become the leader of circular economy by 2030. But I don't really see that the omnibus is matching that ambition. We see a pushback in the due diligence sections of the battery regulation, and we hear that cornerstones of the chemical legislation might be impacted as well. So I can only second what you have said as well. I mean, Brussels is not leading this. We can only listen to what the customers want, what investors ask of us, and also what's already happening within the industry. So I think that a lot is happening, and yeah, I think we need more concrete action to back those policies up.
It took us 45 minutes, but we finally heard the magical word, which relates to me, the customer. Is there a customer demand, a willingness to pay, an expectation for you as a manufacturer to be more circular?
Well, willingness to pay, I'm not sure, but definitely customer demand and customer ask for it. And we see that when we do speak about sustainability, customers do get engaged. And that's also something that we see when we do service with customers, that they really appreciate that we are vocal about sustainability and speak about what we do. So, yeah.
Andre, is this even a quality aspect when it comes to, first of all, OEMs, but also individual customers, to bring up the level of circularity or the footprint, the reduced footprint?
Some of them definitively yes. And the education level, society by society, country by country is different. Mm-hmm. And I think it is our responsibility to really bring it higher and higher and retransfer the information. What is the difference and why the circularity is important, why footprint should be measured, and at the end of the day, how much does it cost? Yeah.
We got questions here for at least 4 or 5 more hours, but I'll focus on the most important ones and try and sort of bundle them, and then just remember what these guys look like, so you can pose your additional questions later. But a great question here is about economic incentives for further recycling. For instance, a recycling tax on batteries, including stationary batteries, would that be helpful?
Yeah, I think it's very important now that with the battery regulation, that the battery producers and importers really take their producer responsibility. It's very clear they have the responsibility to make sure there is a solution, and also to finance collection and recycling of batteries. That is very clear. So it now comes down to taking that responsibility and actually working with the players in the industry to find ways to finance it so that you will have reasonable profits in different steps, and also to incentivize improvements. Of course, as we mature as an industry, we need to be able to bring costs down, and there we also can work together on finding more recycling-friendly solutions so that we can bring down the costs of the recycling.
Can we just sort of in our heads move into your factory? Because we get a lot of questions about what fractions can really be recycled, what's the difference between NMCs or LFPs, and also if you bring in the stationary batteries that are like the power walls and so forth. Okay, so I bring my battery to your factory. What happens now?
The first thing that happens is that we will discharge it. We will remove the energy to make it safe to handle. And then we capture that energy and use it for our own production, or we sell it to the grid. So first step is discharging. Then we dismantle the pack. We take out all the parts. The copper cables will go in one bin, electronics in another, and all the casing in a third, and so on. And we sell these fractions to different other recycling purposes. And then we end up with the battery modules. These are fed into a crushing line. So we crush them, we dry the material, and we sort the material that comes out. So we have a very advanced sorting line. We have roughly 15 different fractions. And then black mass is this mass with the critical elements is the most important one, most valuable one. But most fractions we are able to get a positive return on. Some we have to pay to get rid of. But the overall recovery rate is already above 90%, and we have a...
By weight?
By weight. And then we have the clear target of getting this to as close to 100 as possible.
And is it from battery to battery, or where do the raw materials go?
The critical elements, typically the lithium, or the black mass containing lithium, nickel, manganese, cobalt, the graphite, that will go to refining and reintroduced into new battery production, while other materials like aluminium casing would typically go to aluminium recycling and maybe end up in your Polestar, and then copper also to copper refining and so on.
And I think a key issue for you is that when the battery arrives, you have to ask, so what kind of battery are you? Because there's so many.
Yep.
But from 1st of January, if I understand things right, there's going to be an individual passport for every kind of battery. Does that solve things for you? Does it matter?
I'm a bit curious. I think to some extent, but I wonder if we get enough granularity on the information we need to make a better process. Because we would like to know what kind of electrolyte do you use in your cells. That would be very good information for us, and I doubt that you will give it to us. But let's see. I'm optimistic, and then we'll see.
I'm also thinking, and I want to hear the two of you discuss that, because I'm thinking that a lot of battery secrets you need to know in order to do great circularity, but you don't necessarily want to tell because it's secret.
Yeah, I mean, we are also very much interested in hearing what you guys need to succeed with battery recycling, because that's also in the best of our interest. And yeah, I mean, I'm really interested in what type of collaboration we can have across industries to really pinpoint that. Yep. Because I mean, we do such requirements when we source batteries and when we build our vehicles. So it's really crucial that we take your perspective into account to achieve that full value chain.
We need to have a visit very soon.
Yeah.
And you're even closer than Oslo. It's just a few hours from here. So
yeah.
Easily done. Andre, I want to bring you up to a topic that's been on my mind for a long time. And it's that when we discuss the circular economy, I think it should really be like an oval or a super ellipse or something, where we emphasize that the usage phase should be as long as possible. We should be more efficient before things go into scrap. Unfortunately, they might have to in the end. And there's also this whole discussion about the second and perhaps even the third life of batteries. How important is that equation? Should we emphasize second life of batteries more before it goes to the factory?
I think it depends only on creativity. If we have idea how to use the thing, we can use the thing.
Yeah.
I'll be a bit provocative and say that Second life is dead.
Second life is dead. If it's life, okay. All right, explain that.
Yeah, and I'm happy, very happy to hear your views on this, Hans-Erik, also. But we see that 2, 3, 4 years ago, most of the batteries that were taken out of vehicles in Norway were resold for second life applications, and 90% of it was exported. That has completely stopped now. Because the ones demanding these batteries, they usually use them for energy storage systems. They are now buying cheap LFP cells instead. And that makes it more economically worthwhile for them to do the building of the energy storage system. So we have seen, on the ground evidence that the batteries that were sold, exported out to Norway before, is now piling up in the yards.
Piling up in yards, waiting for what?
For recycling.
For recycling, waiting
No,
for...
but not necessarily. I mean, I agree with the situation, but I mean, it's really, things are happening for the first time every year, in a sense, in this market. It's a growing market where a lot of things are changing. We saw a lot of second life companies 10 years ago that have this bright idea to use, car batteries or other kind of batteries in secondary application. In some cases, they did really well. Some of them, they did so well, so they were outgrowing the supply of batteries, and they started to use overstock or new batteries. And as you say, I mean, from that point, the batteries had gone in price from like $300 a kilowatt hour down to close to $50 a kilowatt hour in some cases, maybe $80. So of course, that's a driver. But at the same time, the batteries are still there. And I think there were a lot of people in Spain and Portugal 1 month ago that just would have been happy to have 1 or 2 kilowatt hours at home.
You mean when we had the huge power outage?
Right, yeah. So I mean, it's really, I agree with Andre that it's a little bit of creativity and ideas, obviously. I mean, I think there is it's a mismatch between the old business models for car dismantlers and the situation where they are right now. They have been in a very mature market. They have a business model which basically depends on that they are harvesting the cars for the good parts, and they are selling them in a quite curated and organized way. I don't like when we are talking about scrap yards, especially not in Northern Europe. I think that's not the case. It's really professional businesses, but it's professional businesses in an industry or a market that's been there for a long time, and now that is changing. And there are not a huge demand for replacement batteries. We see that for some. I mean, Nissan Leaf, BMW i3, Tesla Model S. There is some demand for replacement batteries that you can use, lower mileage batteries, and to put into older vehicles. But of course, it's kind of marginal. So I agree that you are in that situation. But I mean, one of the situations why these batteries are there is because they want to have more money than what anyone is prepared to pay. Isn't that the case?
Yeah, and then when there's no one there to pay for it, then it ends up with recycling.
Right. So yes, I mean,
which is better than being stored for many years and having the potential risk of that.
Absolutely. And for instance, we always seen a difference. So I mean, hybrid batteries, which we not least have a lot here in Sweden, they have always been less attractive than what pure EV batteries have been, because they are just more complicated, not as great to work with. And I guess those are the ones that you got earlier, more to a higher degree. So my point is, it's an open market for anyone to just try to go between Hydrovolt and the shelf and to see whether they can capture more value. If they can't, then obviously it will go in your direction.
Yeah.
Time passes quickly when you're having important. I'm very glad that throughout the session, I think we managed to include 28 of your questions and comments in the questions, because some of them overlapped, obviously, in the questions and comments we've had here. And I want to wrap this up. Actually, I don't want to wrap this up. We have to wrap this up with the final questions, which would be that obviously we all want to meet at EV39 next year. And a year is a very short term, but we also know that things happen very quickly at EU level now, for good, sometimes maybe not so much for good when it changes with the omnibus simplification of legislation, for instance. So what realistically, when it comes to becoming a driving force of circular vehicles, what realistically can we hope for between now and EVS39? You first and then the rest of us.
What we can expect from...
Yes, or what do you want to see happen in the next 12 months and 2 days?
Yeah, as you say, that's a very, very short time. I think we actually need consolidation in the market in Europe, that the really good players remain there and the others don't. That's one harsh part of it. What I really want, again, the success of recycling, reuse and circularity, it is not about circularity. I want to see electric cars on the road. I think we have to remember, why are we at all here? We are here to decarbonize transportation. So that's, I mean, we need demand. If you have demand, then somebody might think that maybe we should actually invest in a battery value chain here. But otherwise, it won't happen.
Thank you. Ole Christen.
That's a very difficult question to answer, but I think I would say if we can get the battery regulation fully implemented and we also see enforcement of it, then I would be happy.
That is a very concrete and good way forward. Thank you. Andres?
Well, I think 12 months is nothing, but at least let's start discussing serious things and ask serious questions.
And what would those key serious questions be?
For instance, how are we going to be competitive? How are we going to incentivize the investments in Europe? How we are going to really speed up the research and development made in Europe? These are questions, I think, to be answered. And they will pay off in the next turn, in the next circle, yeah.
Thank you. Sofia?
Yeah, I think I might come from a slightly different perspective. What we saw in, for example, the circularity gap report for 2025, that global circularity is on a decline. And we know what we need to do. We need to increase the use of secondary raw materials, and we need to decrease overall resource consumption. So I guess that's my call to action, to really get working with those issues, and hope that we will be in a better place and position for EVS39.
To get working with these issues. And I was glad that we focused on something that's just 12 months ahead, because it's very easy to say that by 2030 or 2050 we should achieve this. But I think it's about taking those steps in the right direction every day, every summit, every EU meeting, and every conference. And I think that with this brief hour together, we certainly took some very important steps in the right direction in terms of increasing our knowledge on this basis and finding new areas of increased cooperation so that we can move further, faster together. And I think we all agreed that the organizers did a great job in giving us this wonderful panel. Please help me applaud Hans-Erik, Ole Christen, Andrei, and Sofia.